There you go.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
You got it. Did you notice that Brian got choked up when he started introducing me? That was kind of cool. I'll remember that. Let's see if we put that there. So my name is David Metter, and the answer is yes. My mom dressing me in Garanimals at a young age highly influenced the way that I dress now. That's why everything matches. See, I got socks that match, everything matches. I tried to tone it down today because I didn't want you to deal with the awesomeness of Garanimals, and miss out on what we were going to talk about. This is me. That's my picture. That's the picture that marketing makes me use in my presentations. This is the picture that I like to use in my presentations. And notice, anybody a fan of Next Up? So do me a favor, text Clint or anybody on the team. Notice that I have the Next Up cap there. I get $25 every time that he gets alerted that I'm showing off swag of Next Up. So besides the fact that we paid the sponsorship to be the keynote, I think the reason why Brian and Carrie felt comfortable with me talking about attribution is because, I have this path of attribution in me. My whole life has been in the car business. Started selling cars, sold for about 7 years, managed a dealership. Like many of you, got promoted, not really, into that management role, and then ultimately ran a dealership. And then I flipped to the vendor side in the infancy of CRM, was there for a while, helped to grow a company, and went back to the operational side, and I was so blessed to become a CMO before CMOs were cool at a large dealer group. And I did that for about 6 years, and that's really where I started cutting my teeth on understanding what attributed a sale. So my hope is that that kind of helped me and led me here, because during that time at Mile One, we actually developed the product that is now AutoHook. And what was cool about that was we actually built it within a company called HookLogic, and HookLogic served travel and retail. So completely different than automotive, but what was super awesome about it was that I got to learn about what was happening in travel and retail, which seems to be, go ahead and answer that. Well, wait. No, I'm just kidding. It was cool because they always seemed to be talking about something that eventually got to automotive. And one of those things was attribution. So when we officially started AutoHook in 2011, we knew that we were driving certain customers into a showroom, and when we matched it to sales, we were attributing that sale and all that kind of cool stuff. But I needed a cool tagline. And I was sitting in these meetings that I was a part of within HookLogic for the travel and retail side, and I started hearing this word attribution. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. What is that? So I had to actually Google it, and that is not a joke. That is for real. Did not know what it was. And I go, oh, hey, wait a minute. That's what we do. We attribute showroom visit. I'm like, oh, all right. So I'm going to tag that in my marketing. And in 2012, we were talking about attribution when we barely knew what it was, and no one else in the industry was really talking about it. So arguably, you could say that I'm like the father of attribution within automotive. At least none of you say that. My kids say it. My wife says it only because I repeat it over and over again, and I've ingrained it in their heads. Or if you're Steve White from Clairvoy, where are you, Steve? He calls me the grandfather of attribution, so maybe that's more realistic. But really, where my attribution attitude started was with balloons, and that's why I laughed when I think Brian set me up on this one. But balloons really started me in understanding how things attributed to sales, because when I was in sales, when I was selling cars, what were the two things, especially if you're a dealer up north, what are the two things that salespeople do on Saturday mornings? They sweep off cars when it's snowing, and they put balloons out when it's not snowing. And even when it's snowing, sometimes you put out balloons, because balloons sell cars. They actually do, right? Because when you put balloons out, people show up. It's like the craziest thing. Are they showing up because of the cars, or are they showing up because of the balloons? And my sales manager would get mad at us, like if we didn't get out there at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning and start hanging up balloons, because when we saw this and there were no balloons, there were no customers. But man, I'll tell you what, you put balloons out and all of a sudden people stop and they're like, holy crap, what's going on? They've got balloons, there must be something cool going on. And they stop at your dealership and you're like, that's awesome. But you can't do like one balloon. You got to outclass the rest of it, especially if you're like in an auto mall. You got to have more balloons than the next guy has balloons, right? So one balloon like is you're losing. You got to have balloons on every single car. And it's got to be everywhere, right? So it's like more balloons than you actually have inventory. But I would say, I don't know if I truly believe this whole thing about the balloons and selling cars thing. But every time that we didn't put the balloons out, we didn't see, it was like crickets. It's like the craziest thing. And our sales manager would then yell at us. We'd put the balloons out. Guess what happened? People in the showroom were like, holy crap, how did that happen? Well, it has to absolutely be about the balloons because we took surveys of customers and you know what they said? They go, hey, balloons are selling cars. We bought our car because you had balloons. And I'm like, crap, how did these guys get away with it? Like they don't have balloons. Well, it's because, you know, they're Lamborghinis, maybe that's it. But everybody else has to have balloons. So that's my presentation, I'm done. No, I'm kidding. That's not even talking about the cool lettering on the side of the cars, right? You put that out and you put balloons, guess what happens? 100-car day. It's like an awesome thing, right? So let's kind of clean all this crap off of the word attribution. I'm going to take a different take, and actually my hope, I'm speaking to one person today, and it's Paul. Where's Paul? Where was Paul? He said he wanted something executable. Look at, oh, Paul moved. Paul, you can't move on me, dude. Like, yeah, I'm not that good. Especially, I can't turn my head very well either. So, this is for you, Paul, like a dedication to Paul. It is about giving you something to go back and execute because, quite frankly, we don't have a data problem. Everybody thinks that we've got to layer on more stuff. The reality is what you have will actually help you get to where you want to go with everything else that you saw yesterday and everything that you're going to see today. This is no knock on anybody or anything, it's just the reality because what happens is that sometimes in our business we lack a little bit of common sense around this because we get too much noise, so much noise, because everybody has an opinion on it and it influences the way we try to do our business every day. And the reality is you guys are pretty good operators and you know how to run your business. So when you have all that noise, you really can't have clear goals. That's a problem. And then you just kind of give up. Like I had this conversation with a marketing director, actually has some of his people here today. And his problem was that he has goals. His group has goals. But everybody who touches those stores have to kind of have their own goals in the way that they present all the information. And that makes it really, really tough. And that's when people start throwing up their hands and say they can't execute well. But the reality is that no two things are the same. And that's why it's tough when somebody, even when I get up here and I go, hey, look, this is what you need to do. I can't tell you what you need to do because I have literally no idea how your store runs and what your issues are. But we do it every single day, and when vendors come in, they do that to you every single day, right? And it gets a little nauseating every single day because no two dealerships are the same. This is the reality. And I'll tell you, one thing that we don't talk about is no two salespeople are the same. You know this to be true. Like we had 1,100 salespeople that, that kind of reported up and through our organization when I was at Mile One. It's like nobody was the same. And their numbers were all different. But it was hard to be able to do anything with them because we didn't have a clear and concise story. Because there was so much complexity to the stuff that we were getting. And it made it hard for us to do our jobs well. So I'm going to help put the pieces together. My hope is when I finish and you go to the bathroom, because you're not going to ask me any questions, is that you will have awesome stuff to kind of take back. So the first question is, what's the best data? We can sit here and we can talk about all of the things that we spend our time on. And what I mean by that is the real world, if you look on the right-hand side, we spend about 80% of our time looking at traffic driving, website traffic type things. We don't do what we probably should do is look at the sales data. Now, the only reason and this is no knock, you probably don't do it because it doesn't tell you the complete story. it doesn't tell you. You only know what you know when you sell cars at your dealership. And then maybe you'll get a little bit of an analysis either really super late, like 60 or 90 days late, or you'll get something within your brand. But all of the decisions that you make, I would tell you, have to come from sales and service, and those ROs and those sales, to allow you to make awesome decisions and spend more time, money, and effort on the things that kind of drive all of those things, from leads all the way down to your traffic. And so I get to quote myself, which is kind of cool, right? As you get older, you can do that, I guess, when you become more senile, is that you really don't understand what you're winning unless you really understand where you're losing and what you're losing to. And this is nothing new. Like, this is crazy. I had a peer of mine share this with me, and it's amazing in the sense that if you read it on the right-hand side, I'll summarize it. It basically says, if you check some things like people buying competitive cars within your own, around your organization, and the reasons why those deals were lost to your competitors, this was written in 1939. Like, it's an actual document. If you want it, I'd be happy to send it to you. Somehow we got the PDF of it. It's something that still holds true today, but we don't do a very good job of it at all, because our dealership data is one-dimensional. It is what we do, where we succeed and we fail within the building and the construct of our dealership or dealership groups. Sometimes we'll get information from the brands and they'll say, hey, you're doing a good job against your competitive stores in your marketplace. That's kind of two-dimensional. And then there's multi-dimensional, which is what I'm going to talk about today. We're going to talk about filling in those gaps. And the problem is that, and this, again, no knock on CRMs and DMSs. I have lots of friends that own those types of not DMS companies. Yeah, I guess they do. That's fine. Some of them I don't like. But they're not here, so it's okay. We can talk about people who aren't here, right? Clearly, we can do that. Awesome. So those companies aren't at fault, because they do what they do really super well. It's just a matter of infusing the right information in. So a long time ago, this is an actual ad, it's pretty funny, from RL Polk. We all know Polk, which is now IHS Polk. They were hired, their company literally started because you had two competing brands that wanted to know who was number one. That's how Polk started, and they started gathering all the registration data, and that's basically been kind of the way that we look at sales over the last almost 100 years, which is crazy because it takes so long to get that information, and sometimes it takes 6, 7, 8 weeks. And in 10 years ago, that was okay, but we live in this world of instant. Like, we've got to know this stuff and to make decisions on it, and it's hard to do that in that kind of an element. The fortunate thing is that there are opportunities, like with Urban Science, because we've done so much over the last 30 years with the manufacturers and earned their trust, they actually trust us with the sales data. So we get it every single day. And that becomes super powerful, sometimes more powerful than what we even understand and know it. So over the last couple of years, we've been looking at this. And when I say we get this for almost every manufacturer every single day. So like today, I know what sold at your dealership yesterday, and kind of the model breakdown and how it compares to the industry and all that kind of fun stuff. That's cool. How do we use that? How can that be practically used in our business? Well, simple terms, we can look at things like natural disasters. We all know that, that the Houston market was deeply impacted. And within that Houston market, auto dealerships were deeply impacted, right? With inventory issues and everything else. People lost cars. Customers were to be, needed to be taken care of. Here's the interesting line of what happened in Houston. And this is what you do with that near real-time data. So we knew that before the hurricane hit, that was roughly 2% of the total market in the United States in Houston. Look what happened when the hurricane hit. Like, no shocker, right? Business went down. That's what happened. Most dealerships were closed. Most people were out of the city for the most part. Look what happened afterwards. Again, no shocker. But you know what the shocker was? Look at what happened to the business after that. it actually accelerated higher than where it had been before. If I were to take this and do Florida, I didn't want to waste a lot of time and effort on those slides, but I'll tell you, it didn't do that. Even in the markets that got hit, what happened was it was here, it went down, it blipped up, but then it kind of returned back, and in some cases even under what happened. So Houston was an anomaly, but we'd never know that 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I mean, that's not impactful. If I'm a dealership in that marketplace and I see this immediately, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to figure out how to get more inventory. I'm going to, it makes employment decisions easier for me and staffing issues easier. It helps me to advertise differently where everybody else is maybe not doing that because they don't know what's going on in the marketplace. I go after it more aggressively because I know what's happening. So this is just one of about 100 examples I could give you around that. Like, we use, and our manufacturers use this application. And it literally gives them the ability. I could pull out my phone right now, and I could go to Paul. I'm not picking on you, you're just close, and I can see you. Oh yeah, Paul's over there too. We got 2 Pauls. This is going to be confusing. Paul, you need to move to the other side of the room. This gives me the ability to go to Paul and look at his dealership or dealer group sales as it compares to the market. Not 60 days from now, but actually right now. What's happening today, and it gives me the opportunity to see things that I've not seen before. And even selfishly within AutoHook, we use this. This is what really elevated our business over the last 2 years, is because we knew what we were selling. We knew that we were driving customers in, we knew what we were selling, but you know what we really didn't know? We didn't know how many of those consumers were like new to brand, or how many of those consumers were defecting to other brands. And it started giving us some clear direction and a much cleaner message. So those are just practical examples. How can we do what you want to do with that same kind of information? It's kind of like the chocolate and the peanut butter. This is where I talked about execution. We can take that same data that resides in your dealerships within CRM and give you a multi-dimensional view. That's the best way I could say it, the easiest way I could say it. And we can do it and break it down into 4 buckets that are super important to you: lead source, model, geography, and even salesperson. There's never been, in my time in the industry that I've seen, a way to look at the real true effectiveness and ineffectiveness of salespeople. And I don't mean ineffectiveness as damning, I mean it as how do we make them, like, instead of just saying, you're good, I can't put my finger on it, I'm not sure what's going on. How about if we give you a true prescription on what we can do? Instead of turning over salespeople, how do we fix it? Because it's a known issue, because we can see it. And I'm going to give you practical examples of this. So let me show you. This, when you take and you apply that CRM data from a dealership, and then you overlay it with sales, we not only can see the sales at the dealership, but we can see the sales that happened outside of that dealership that stayed within the brand. So let's use an example of a Chevy store. This would show me in the blue what I sold and gives me my overall closing ratio of 19%. But look what happens with the defection rate. This is total defection rate, whether they bought at a dealership within your brand or outside of your brand. So now all of a sudden you start seeing what you're losing within the opportunities that you've paid for that were driven through an opportunity into CRM. Clear? And you start to see trends. So whether you're working with a training organization or you're working through different advertising opportunities, or even changing pricing within your inventory, you start to see kind of an overview of effectiveness or ineffectiveness when you make those changes. And then you can start looking at possibilities of defection. And so this is giving you, I can look at the salesperson that's really struggling within a geography that we may or may not advertise well in models that we're not pricing correctly or don't have enough of, and within the source. And I'll give you even more practical examples of those. But this is kind of my favorite because we always kind of knew that as lead opportunities were in that period of time, they just kind of fell off, and we assume, well, they're out of market, they didn't buy, or they bought somewhere else. Look what we see at a dealership level. Like, this dealership is super awesome in the first 4 or 5 days. They're selling, right? And they're not losing to other competitive makes, or, yeah, let's ask them. Yep. Yep. So I'm fortunate in the sense that I have one of our partners that gets these. And so let me tell you exactly what these bars mean. Blue is good. Blue is your dealership. Gray is they bought from a competitive dealership that sells that same brand. And then the black, and probably back there it looks a little grayish, blackish gray, is if they left the brand totally and bought from a competing dealership. So let's use our Chevy example in this case. 230 customers that I had leads from in my CRM bought immediately. 14 bought a Chevy somewhere else, and 9 bought something else, a Nissan. Clear? Good? Awesome. Look what happened at day 8 to 14. And you'll see, if you were looking one-dimensionally, you're going, hey, we're still good. We're selling lots of cars. That is the point of defection for this dealership. It is the point in which consumers who are in market buy in cars not from you. So it gives you the opportunity to, gives you the opportunity to change the way that you make decisions, whether it's marketing operations or even down to pricing. Yep.
Do you identify which dealerships you lost the sale to, either within the brand or outside the brand?
We will in aggregate. We won't down to consumer, going to, like David Metter going to ABC Motors. So we can look at that as an aggregated number of saying, here's where, yes. And in fact, in the report, it shows you, very interestingly, and I left this out, and I should have put it in, is that I put side by side, and one side, the trend of certain models. So what kind of dealership are you?
Oh, I'm not in the dealership.
Okay, just make one up. Just say you are.
All right,
Ford. So F-150, the trend is going up, that they're losing on F-150s. On this side, it's showing the dealership where you're losing the most sales to. If you're smart, you put 2 and 2 together, there's a high likelihood that ABC Ford is taking the Ford F-150 business from you. Right? So, yes?
Can you tie in differences in sales strategy? Because let's say that model looks great, but if there's nothing left for you to speak about after day 7
Yep.
for the consumer, especially regarding price, then you will lose people because people are continuing to look for a better price when your price is fixed or best price.
Yep.
Did you tie that into your reporting as well?
We can, with the input from the dealership or the dealership group. Certainly.
Versus the other dealerships that are in your
We
market.
could potentially, if that's the path in which the dealership goes. And that's why it's important when I said no two dealerships are the same, because I could just assume, like we all assume in this business sometimes, like balloons sell cars, that what you are dealing with at your store, you're dealing with at yours, and then we just blanket a dashboard for you, and that's silly. That's not right. That's not strategic for you. So hopefully I answered your question right. But we then can start looking at this by lead source. And you can see really interesting information when you break this down in the same kind of context from how many cars you sell, because one-dimensionally you may think that you're killing it, right? But then you start to see what happens within your brand and outside of your brand. And when you have this is not to, let me say this, and I want to be very, very clear. This isn't the first decision, go fire the lead providers. That's not the decision. The decision is, What could you do differently? Because there could be things operationally that you're just doing wrong, like you have one person handling every single opportunity that comes through this third-party lead provider. They're getting swamped with 150 leads every week. Guess what? That doesn't really work. Is that the lead provider's fault? Absolutely not. Or are you pricing differently? Or if you change all of those things, and that's what's so cool about having this multidimensional look, is that when you change all those things and things still don't look good, guess what? That gives you a reason to make a change. You've kind of gone through the steps and the processes within your dealership to make sure that you're managing well. So, my favorite area is the salesperson, because what you see is something completely different than what we've ever seen before. So you may think that, let's say Travis is a great salesperson because his numbers are great. He has 30 sales, but look at the defection within brand. Opportunities that he worked are driving away from our dealership and going to the same type of dealership and buying the same type of car that we sell. When you start laying this over, when you start taking third party, geography, sales, and the inventory piece, guess what you start to do? You start to stitch together a pretty good story. Like for car people, you have this innate ability to walk into a dealership and physically see things and know within 5 or 10 minutes like what's good and what's not good. You can do that in restaurants. We just, you understand that. You take this and it completely changes your vision within a dealership. It's amazing in a sense. Because if I'm looking at Tabitha, poor Tabitha, man, she's never, if I see something like that, and her closing ratios are low and defections are high and she's just not, she's not working well with certain leads, and it's probably just because she's got too many freaking leads. Like, this clears that up, but it starts to show it in a way that you've not seen it before. And then salesperson effectiveness. This is super fun in the sense that you may have a diamond in the rough, you don't even know it at your dealership. And so how somebody gets to 149%, that's effectiveness. So that's their total effectiveness. So they're overselling how the dealership is performing. So you may not think that Jim is a great salesperson, but based on the opportunities and everything around him, guess what? Jim is killing it. So your number one salesperson may not be your number one salesperson. These are things that I wish I would have had, whether I was a salesperson, a manager, or even a CMO, to be able to look at things differently, because it would have probably changed our perspective on the way that we retained, trained, and hired people.
David, one of the blind spots, right, is that maybe the number one salesperson is just burning through leads, dispositioning those leads as, bullshit, duplicates, out of market, right? So in the CRM, they know how to jack up the data so they don't look like they're burning through. But this type of report really cuts through that, because the lead was assigned to them. Even if they marked it out of market, you're coming back in and saying, no, this guy's just burning, looking for low-hanging fruit.
Those people who were marked as could not buy or did not buy or anything actually bought. And we know what they bought, and when they bought, and where they bought. All of those things. So, from there are, and we'll talk about this in a minute, what are the executables, but just from an operational standpoint, this makes a training organization valuable, super valuable to coming in and being able to diagnose what's going on within a dealership. Yes? Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I'm kidding. Yes, I do. Yes.
From a tier 1 standpoint, obviously the manufacturers like sales so forth. From a dealer standpoint, effectiveness is being challenged a lot and so forth. Obviously, your other clients are trying to do that. So how do you soften or try to get more effectiveness where dealers want to use it? Obviously, your tools are valuable, but using that word effectiveness can have such a negative.
Yeah, I hear you. That was a super simple one that I have an answer for. The effectiveness is really guided not by manufacturer or national numbers. It's effectiveness within the dealership. So we could reword it however that anyone would want, within that dealership. But the reality is it's not somebody else's bar. It's the dealership's bar. Got it. So we'll just change it. No, that's the cool thing about about that. We can just. So here's my question to you. Between now and I've got 20 more minutes, you come up with. I'm kidding. You can come up with like that. I'll tell you what I really want. I want to recognize the people who really do a good job in the dealership. And I don't want to battle with the people who aren't. I want to lift them high because we know that if we know what's going on with a salesperson, we can typically fix it. That's a known, right? The problem is when we don't know what's going on with a salesperson, that's when we struggle. That's when we seriously struggle. But geography is also one of those interesting aspects of our business because, again, in a world of assumption, we think that we own our backyard. And the only time that we typically see that we don't is if the manufacturer tells us. How about if we saw a complete view of that? And more importantly, this data, this information can then be used to go and execute with the cool things that you are doing to drive the traffic, to get more leads, to all of those things. When you have this much more multidimensional look, you can utilize this data for everything that you do. It's not just an operational tool. And when you start to see defection within certain areas, it could be that you start doing targeting in those. So if I were to provide that back, if I'm a GM dealer and I provide that back to CDK and they change the way that we go and target specifically in that market, that's going to make me better. It's going to make me better with them. They're going to be better. Everyone's going to be better. And we have more consumers, which is awesome. So I talked earlier about the model. I said that I didn't share the one, but this will give you kind of a perspective of like where do we lose opportunities that we are getting to other dealerships. And we can see very specifically what's happening. And we can see even greater, like if they're submitting a lead for, in this case, a Z71, but they're just buying Ford F-150s. Like how do we change the way that we go and either price, market, and go after those consumers? Or are they even coming in? And when they come in, are we doing a good job in that operational side? I wanted to show you this because I'm going to show you 3 slides because the assumption again, because even our assumption was, these are all going to be about the same. This is a dealership and this is time-based. And remember earlier I showed you the time-based where day 8 to 14 is where we start to see some hiccups. That's not necessarily true with every single dealership. Look at this dealership. They have this weird, so they don't start high and go down. They have like this leveling. They kind of go like this. They go down. They go up. They have a real issue at that same 8 to 14. But look what happens on the long tail at 31 to 60. And almost no dealership has any kind of a program. And in this case, like 8 to 14 all the way out, I would argue that has to be automation. That has to be vendor driven. That has to be like a mindset because typically the manpower in the dealership are not going to be able to do it. So any type of reanimation or retargeting or all, that's where this data really comes in. So this isn't just helping one aspect of your business. This can literally help every single element and make you smarter in the way that you go and do your business. Here's another dealership. Look what happens. Just weird. Like at the beginning, they're not really good. And they get really good at 5, 6, and 7. Weird. But when I sit down, if I sit down with a dealer, I go, okay, And this is, and TrueCar is going to think that I'm picking on them. This is not true, and I'll tell you why. You sit here and you look at how many defections come from this, and where the defections are from an inventory standpoint, and the salesperson and the geography. I can say, look, if a TrueCar lead comes in, and we know that they're going to Jake Morgan, and it's on a CRV from this zip code, guess what's going to happen? We're going to lose that sale. We better seriously, we got to figure out how to change what we're doing in our behavior, whether, again, it's pricing, the person has too many opportunities, that zip code is too far away, maybe we shouldn't be in that, or maybe it's really close and we're getting kicked in the chin a bit. So it's not necessarily a third-party problem, it's a process problem around that third party. So if we change that and we go, hey man, now that we know this, we're going to go hard and heavy after these opportunities that come through TrueCar, that go in on a CRV, that come from this zip code, and we're going to change. You can do this too at the desk. Like if I'm a desk manager, you tell me when there's a deal that's working, you come up to me and we're working a deal and it's on a CRV from this lead provider in this area, guess what? Those people are not leaving the showroom. They're not. They can't. You know why? Because when they leave the showroom, they're never coming back because historically it says that they're going to go purchase them from somebody else. So having that ability to see something that you've never seen before is awesome. And we all think that every dealership is going to be the same around close and defection. Not true at all. Look at close and defection. This is 2 dealerships. I could roll out 50 dealerships and they'd all be all over the board. And so the same with third-party lead providers. This is a third-party lead provider kind of aggregated out. I obviously am not going to show the names of the third-party lead providers, so do not ask me. I'm not going to do it. But look what happens. It's crazy. And here are some other examples of those. So there's opportunities. When I show this not to beat up third-party providers, I show this, and I'll give you a great story and example. When I was at Mile 1, we had KBB leads flowing through on the Value Your Trade. We had Value Your Trade. This is back when really there was only 2 different trade lead aggregators, in the business. So we chose KBB, and our salespeople within the 60 some odd dealerships that we had would notoriously bitch and moan about the KBB leads. And that they weren't buyers. They weren't real buyers, right? And so unfortunately, there was nothing cool like this at the time, but we would look at historical data and guess what we found? There were a lot of buyers within those opportunities. And this is telling you that same exact thing. There are opportunities, so instead of just pulling the plug on somebody, you look at those. And so, Paul, when I said that I'd give you some executables, these are the ones. You can look at all of this and do nothing with it, or you can look at this and say, look, I can change my behavior around how I convert leads and how I can improve that, because when people say I don't need any more leads, that I completely understand. When they say that I'm doing a good job on my website, that's when I kind of draw the line, because about 95% of those customers, they fall into this bucket of not sure what's going on. We know a lot of them buy, we just got to know what's going on. So from that conversion, I would say not even lead conversion, but just conversion overall, this data helps you enhance that opportunity. Operations, I think I gave enough practical examples of how training organizations can come in and be so much smarter and faster on how to be able to fix things within the dealership for you to be able to do. And even the example of desking deals differently or being able to work opportunities differently, you get that from an operations standpoint. And then from the traffic driving, that's where I go, not last because I don't think it's valuable. I do. The problem is I think you need to fix the other 2 things first so that when you start driving, it's like a baseball, if you know baseball and hitters, like you don't put your best hitter in the 9-hole. That's where you put a pitcher in the National League because they can't hit. Your best hitters are at the front of the lineup and now in the 2 and the 3 and the 4 hole because they get more at-bats. Once you figure out all of these things, then you start getting more at-bats and driving more traffic. Guess what happens? Nothing bad. Great conversion, great showroom visitation, great sales within your dealerships and not at the competitor dealerships. So, most of us know what kind of ails us. We think we know all of the things that are kind of the unknown, but what we need is we need to really understand what that is and have a prescription that's set for that. And so I know that this conversation in attribution is a little different than what you've seen so far, but this is where I think it starts and stops. It allows you to do all the other things really well because you need a cure. So when you have that ailment, yeah, funny, right? That was the first thing that popped up in Google when I said the cure. So anyways, yes, for people in my age range. So this is not just talk. We see great case studies around this. And I'm fortunate, one of our dealers is in the room today, and he was the one who made sure that I went back and told you exactly what the bars were because they now understand and believe in the data that they see. More importantly, the facts and the improvement came directly from the actions from the data. So great organization in Maury's, had a dealership that we looked at and said, look, in fact, Outback and Forester within there, they were underperforming in that area. And Outback actually had the biggest drop. And so you saw there's a lead source, a lead provider within there, and zip codes. So we attacked those. And in a short period of time, you saw great improvement. So you saw this increase in a time that not everyone was increasing. That's what's so cool about it. So you see this 15% increase in a time where everything else was kind of falling off. So that's when you know you're doing something well, not when you're just riding the wave of everyone else. And then you see this great decrease in defection, which I think is powerful in the conversation at the dealership level. And then you see this awesomeness in close rate, and it just inspires more people to do a better job operationally within the dealership. They're like, hey, there are opportunities here. These are awesome. But we didn't see this at one dealership. We've seen it, and I could march dealership after dealership. We're fortunate. I think there's some people from Germain here, from the South stores, right? Awesome. Good. So this is a store that's up in Ohio in their North Division. Same kind of thing. Had a problem. They were losing opportunities in their market. There are 5 Ford stores in the market. They weren't doing what they wanted to do. And so we started looking at this data kind of the same way and said, look, we're going to target these customers. Weirdly, same kind of increase in the market area, but this happened across all of their models. And so they saw this loyalty increase and defection decrease. You heard Clav say this yesterday, that he quoted John Wanamaker, and this was like the bane of my existence when I was at Mile One. It drove me crazy because the president of our dealer group would say this to me all the time. And it was my intention, it was the thing that kind of drove me in that job, was to figure out, A, which side, and decrease what we didn't know. And I truly believe that the only way we do that is we start looking at sales, that sales level opportunity of sales defection, and we start writing the better prescription on how we go about doing our business. So instead of going by our gut, which is not because we want to, it's because in most cases we have to, because it's not laid out for us in that multidimensional view, this gives us the ability to be more prescriptive in the way that we do that. And I had to look up that word too, so you know. So here are my action items for you. And I will, just by the way, I will share this deck. I might take a couple of quick things out, but I'll share this deck for anybody who wants it, and I can, put a link up, and you'll be happy to go through it. But so that you know that you don't have to write these down. Certainly take pictures if you want to. I want you, and this is to you, dealers, I want you to hold your people accountable once you have the right data. It's hard to hold them accountable when you don't have it. So in this case, once you have that sales and defection data, you hold them accountable, and ultimately, you'll make your vendor partnerships so much better. It's a much better conversation than just hearing what they have to say and then you telling them what you want to say. Much easier. And pinpoint these individual team members within your dealerships. And whether the word is effectiveness or opportunity or whatever, I don't make fun of that. I mean that because I don't want that to be the rub. I don't want that to be the reason why people get chafed over data. But whatever that looks like, let's see how we can effectively help them move the needle for them to make more money, take care of their families, and ultimately help build our businesses up. And then look at those three. Even if you don't want to look at multidimensional data, look at your opportunities as conversion, operational, and then traffic driving. And with that, I say thank you. And I can't believe we got questions in the middle of it, but that's cool. And I know that I have a little bit of time, so I can certainly open it up to any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
How timely is the data?
Well, the data itself is we call it near real time. It's daily. We are doing this initially on a monthly basis, and I'm so glad you asked this question because I don't believe that this should reside within its own separate report. I believe it should reside where? Where? Say it louder, please. Because CRMs need to hear this. Where? Okay, so in CRM, and guess what that means? There is the opportunity for it to be near real time. So instead of a weekly report or a monthly report or something like that, which is impactful, it should be residing where your people reside the most, which is in CRM. Good question, thank you.
In the ideal world, the CRMs would use this data in real time to change dispositions, right? So that the salesperson's work plan wouldn't continually be going down to follow this sold customer, move them maybe to a service marketing campaign, right? That's what we're talking about, right?
That's what we're talking
about. Making it simple, take the complexity out. Other questions for David Metter?
I see one hand in the front.
I just wanted to touch on what Brian was saying. Does that mean that you, Urban Science, is able to send that disposition back? That person is sold, dead, killed?
That's the conversation that we want to have with the CRMs. And ultimately what we can do at the dealership levels. Yep.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Ask your question. Oh, who's asking? Go ahead.
I'm looking at you.
Hi, David. What are you doing to be able to tie the multi-touch attribution into the sales lead source?
I couldn't hear.
What are you doing to drive the multi-touch attribution into the sales lead source?
What are we doing currently in multi-touch attribution to drive into the lead source?
So essentially, today you're identifying a lead based on where it came from. Will you be able to say, okay, there are several touch points to that, so we can attribute it that way?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you have to start with a foundation, and this is the foundation. But we have every intention. In fact, we're currently working with partners on that. And that's, and you know, we want to do what we do really well and service the industry within that, and then we'll pull in the right people at the right time so that we are able to do what ultimately I think you want us to do.
Other questions? Okay, hold on. Excuse me.
Do the reports have the flexibility of breaking out, like desk managers, a report for that, individual BDC managers, a report for that?
Yeah, so BDC managers, I would say probably yes. Desk managers, if it's a breakout in the CRM,
Yes.
I would say probably yes. We've not been asked that, but that would be fun, and I bet you that my team will start pinging some people to see if we could break that out.
Other questions? Okay, hold on.
But that is, while Brian's walking, that's probably one more reason why living in CRM makes total sense.
Apologies, I kind of lost my voice. but plans for independent pre-owned, not just
good question. I'll put the asterisk back. This is, we're looking at new car sales. We do receive CPO information from some of the manufacturers. We have not looked at used cars. Let me reword that. We've looked at used cars. We don't currently take in that information, and but that I will tell you is it's definitely a thought of mine, for sure. So I had to be careful. I didn't want to say anything that tied me, but we obviously see that hole, and we want that. and we know that it can be done.
Well, would you give David Metter
Yeah.
a big round of applause?